You're listening to episode 3 of the Child Life On Call podcast. After our guest story, you'll hear a message from this episode's sponsor, Woombi MedPods, the first swaddle sack available for hospitalized neonates and infants that work around medical devices. Hi, and welcome to the Child Life On Call podcast. When your child is sick, the whole world seems to stop in its tracks. Plans and priorities change, and your number one job becomes figuring out how to get your child well again. For some of us, rest, medications, and relaxation can do the trick. But for others, it takes more. It takes countless doctor appointments, invasive medical testing, therapies, surgeries. The list goes on. And then you still may not have all of the answers or results you were hoping for. This podcast features parents of children that have an illness or medical condition and gives them a place to share their own journeys and experiences. We will talk about the ups and the downs, the highs and the lows, but one thing seems to remain the same. Children are resilient and teach us more about ourselves and the world than we could ever imagine. Thank you so much for lending a listening ear and opening up your heart to these families and this podcast. I'm your host, Katie Taylor. Today, you'll get a chance to meet Kim Pena. It is rare to get the opportunity to talk to someone who is so eloquent and poised in every aspect of their life, but Kim truly is. In addition to owning and writing an honest, funny, and exciting blog, Kim has been in education for 8 years, and her husband is a police officer. Today, she will be talking to us about her son's journey with Microtia Atresia. Microtia is a congenital deformity where the external ear is underdeveloped. Atresia is the absence or closure of the external auditory ear canal. The malformation of the middle ear bones may be affected, including the narrowing of the ear canal. This is a birth deformity that occurs in about 5,000 to 7,000 births. Today, we will hear Kim talk about her experience in finding out that her son had Microtia Atresia, a link to family history and how that has affected her journey, and the tough decision about how to move forward with surgery. To let you get to know Kim a little bit better, she begins by talking to us a bit about her family and the birth of her precious son, Thomas.
I am married to my husband, Marco. We've been married for 6 years. We've been together for 9. And we kind of came together in Austin. He came for a job from El Paso. I came from Oklahoma to look for a job and kind of met each other along the way. Thomas is our first son and currently our only child. And he was born in 2013. I am an educator. I work in school districts and work with coaching teachers. My husband's a police officer in Austin.
Tell us about when you found out about Thomas's medical condition.
So we found out when Thomas was born. He had a difficult labor, to say the least. He's a little bit stubborn and showed that from the get-go. It was 30 hours. I had to be induced. I was already at 41 weeks, so the doctor wouldn't let me go any longer. So I got induced, and it was still 30. I kind of kept having nurses being like, oh, yeah, you're going to go quick, and that just never happened. I pushed for 4 hours almost, and they finally got him out, but they had to use forceps. And they told us that since they were going to use forceps, they were going to bring in a pediatrician in case, because it wasn't gradual, it was going to happen all at once. So they brought in a pediatrician, and as soon as he was born, the pediatrician wouldn't let me see him. And I knew it was okay. He was crying. They let my husband come cut the umbilical cord, but he wouldn't let me see him. And finally he came over, and he told me, he said his ear didn't completely form, and he's going to have some issues, and I just need to let you know. And I, of course, was in tears, and it had been such a long process. I was like, just let me see him, just give me my kid. And so he did, and he told me after, he said, I have to tell women. I've seen women go into postpartum depression immediately. I've seen, when you have no knowledge of that there's anything wrong, and suddenly your kid is born and there's something wrong, and they're not, the perfect child you envisioned. He said sometimes, it's too much, it's overwhelming, and just the whole. And he said, it's my duty to kind of talk to you first. And I said, that's fine. I wasn't upset or anything. I said, that's fine. I just want to hold him. It did kind of, though, after we found out, it kind of set in over the next week or so. But it was a little different, We would both talk about, he was born with the condition on his right ear, and he was also born with a couple skin tags, which are very commonly associated with this condition. And so it very much was, we kind of, my husband and I would talk about that. We did kind of look at the ear sometimes and catch ourselves. And I told him, I said, I catch myself and I feel bad, but then I'm like, he's a baby. It's okay.
While this news came as a shock to Kim, she had known someone else with this condition. Her husband's brother was also born with Microtia Atresia. So while Kim was unable to hold Thomas immediately after he was born, her husband was able to see him and let Kim know, he's okay. It's what my brother has. So I asked Kim if there was any way to find out if a baby has this condition in utero before they're born.
No, there actually is. If they do a 40 sonogram, which they actually did at one point, but they didn't look at the ears because we didn't know to look at the ears. When they do the 40 sonogram, they can look at the ears and they can tell and they can see, are they fully formed? The ears are actually one of the first things that form. They form in the first trimester at the same time as the kidneys. And so it's really early that it happens and that this condition could become present, and they can see those if they do those type of sonograms. We had been told by a doctor or a specialist that this specific condition was usually your kind of like just a circumstance, like a physical thing. It wasn't a genetic thing. And when it was genetic, it was linear. So like his brother's child would have an option of having it, but not our kid. So we didn't know to look for it. And then our kid was born with it. And so it was kind of like we could have looked for it had we kind of thought about that. Like if we have another, they will for sure look for it. Even though that's even more rare to have siblings with it. But if, that's something they can tell, we didn't know to ask them, or they didn't know to look for it.
Did your relationship with your husband's brother kind of grow from there? Because I'm sure you would want to ask him questions and kind of know what his experience was like and see if it would all kind of line up with what Thomas was going to go through.
Interesting. I don't think that one changed as much as my relationship with my father-in-law changed. His experience of being a parent that went through it and going through the different options, kind of just understanding it, that kind of changed more than anything else. He's the one that, when Thomas first started realizing he was different, when he first started asking questions, he was the one that I could, call or text or anything and just kind of be vulnerable and kind of ask questions and not know what to do and kind of have these, how do I prepare for this kind of things? And he was the one that really has kind of, I think our relationship has grown much more over the last few years than anything else, just because he's been where I am. And so he's able to kind of help me out through that. And he's been a huge help. He was actually there when we went for Thomas's first surgery. He came with us and he was just like with us the whole time. Like it was incredible.
Do you think he has a pretty special relationship with Thomas? Maybe kind of reliving through what he went through with his own son?
I mean, he's a fantastic grandparent. Like he has a fantastic relationship with all his grandchildren. But yeah, I definitely think that Thomas was the first grandchild too. So I think that it kind of compounded it, that they had that kind of to build off of.
Well, so he's born, you find out about the medical condition. What do your doctor's appointments, how soon do you do surgery? How does that all work?
We had to have kidney tests done when he was a few days old, or actually just like a day old, to make sure that the kidneys functioned properly, that they had both formed, all these different things, and they were fine. When he was about 3 weeks old, we had to go to Dell Children's to have a brain wave test done. Pretty much they just wanted us to bring him asleep, and they put all these little different things on his head, and they gave it's a type of hearing test, but it measures if his brain waves are responding to the sounds, and pretty much it tells him if he has a cochlear nerve. So we found out then that he had a cochlear nerve. He has what's called inner ear hearing. He's missing middle and outer ear hearing. He has his first year, he had audiologist appointments to check for hearing every 6 months, starting at 1 month old. And that's also where we first found out about the type of hearing aid that he was available to get when he got his hearing aid at 2 months old. And then he has also had ENT appointments and audiologist appointments since then at once a year. We get those. His first surgery was done when he was 3. And that's really, with microtia, there are different options for surgeries throughout. There's different options for reconstruction of the outer ear. There's different options for either looking at getting your hearing aid put where it attaches to the skull, or there's options for looking at canal reconstruction. And so depending on what option you take, can depend on how old they have to be to get it. Specific options start as young as 3, but other options don't start until 5 to 7. So it really depends on what you choose.
Surgery of any kind can feel scary for any parent. Kim walks us through what her decision-making process was and how they came to one final conclusion.
You know, and that one was kind of like, my husband knew, I think, from having a brother with us, that he wanted to have the surgery. We looked at the different options that they had. One is called a rib graft surgery, which takes place in about 4 different surgeries, but they're shorter. They're like 2 to 3 hour surgeries, where they harvest cartilage from your rib and to create an ear, and they do a skin graft to create that ear. But like I said, it takes about 4 surgeries. His brother had started that process, and I think he got to like the second to last one and just told his parents, like, I'm done, I don't want any more surgeries. And I think seeing his brother go through so many surgeries made my husband much more inclined to look at the option that we went with, which is called a med pore surgery, which is where they take a plastic composite material to form the actual like ear, and they take skin grafts to kind of attach it and shape it. And when we found that one, it could be done as young as 3, which we liked, but it was done sooner rather than later. The doctor actually told us that she liked that because their skin was almost like thinner, like it's more malleable, and it just kind of looks more natural when you're done younger. And it was also 1 surgery. And so he liked the fact that we wouldn't have to go back. It was 1 surgery and the reconstruction was done. And then if we wanted to do, we still have not done either the hearing aid implantment or the reconstruction of the canal, just because those don't happen until he's 6 or 7.
Gotcha. Okay. So when he had that first surgery when he was 3, was that the first time he was under anesthesia?
It was. He had to have a CT scan before it, but he was able to make it through without being under anesthesia. But for his actual surgery, we had to pretty much keep him away from everybody for almost a month before, because he couldn't have any. I mean, they probably asked me like a dozen times, have you had any symptoms of cold or flu? Have you had any? And I'm just like, no, we've been good. But he had to be kind of kept away, and he was under anesthesia for about 13 hours. It was a long day. They let us in when they first started to give him some different things, which was about 6 a.m. or so. I guess we got there about 5, and then maybe they started giving him. They gave him like some stuff to relax him about 5:30, and they took him in about 6. And then we were in the office. It was supposed to, they had told us that it was commonly 8 to 10 hour surgery. That's what we kind of expected. But they had just some things where the surgeon, she was a wonderful surgeon, and she would just tell us. She would call me once an hour to tell me how things were going. And she would tell it, and she came out about 3 times during the day as well. And she would tell us, I need to take my time because of X, Y, Z, and all these different things. And so that's kind of what made it. And she would tell us, like, I'm going to take my time to make it better in the long run, but it might take a longer surgery.
And were you okay with that, or?
It's good kind of where you have that balance in your marriage. I was a nervous wreck that day. I was an emotional wreck leading up to it. My husband was fine. He was cool as a cucumber. So he would, make me go get coffee, make me go walk around, he was like, okay, we can't just stay in this room the whole time. As soon as Thomas came out of surgery and he was puffy and had all these bandages, I was fine because he's out. He's good. Then my husband was kind of like, oh, he's in pain. How do we talk? Then he was kind of, it was harder for him at that point. And so it was good because we kind of balanced each other and just kind of switched.
Yeah, that's really good that it kind of worked out without even having to talk about it. You guys just assumed those roles to begin with. So after he's out of surgery, did he have a long hospital stay after that?
Yeah, they actually release him that day in this type of surgery. It's technically an outpatient surgery. But he came back the exact next day to their doctor's office. We had to say her office is in California, and there's only about 3 surgeons that are really experienced that do this surgery in the country. So that in and of itself was a battle to be able to get our insurance to approve them, to be able to see why they were different, et cetera. But we had to stay in California for 2 weeks after. So he had to meet her for 2 weeks after to change bandages, different things like that, until he was fully, that's when he was fully released. And that's when we could go home.
Did you guys meet any other families while you were there who had gone through the same or a similar surgery as Thomas?
I've talked with families that did, and it's kind of crazy. We met a family at Disneyland. We took him to Disneyland because, we're in California. We wanted to make the best of his, visit. We didn't want it to be completely just, I went for California surgery. So we took him to Disneyland, and they have a very unique kind of bandages for this ear and for this type of surgery. And a mom said, "Oh, did you see Dr. Lewin?" And I said, I looked at her, I said, "Yes." And she said, "Oh, my son got that surgery 3 years ago." And so she introduced us to her son and told it, and they lived there. So she was like, "We're here all the time, Mr. Smith." And she said, "Every now and again, we'll see a kid with those bandages." And she said, "I know what it is because we've been there." So it was she was the only one that I met. I mean, we saw families in the waiting room of the office and things like that, but she was the only one that we met that really kind of just talked to us all. And I've seen people, there's different support groups and stuff online. So I've seen people and met people through online groups, and they connected me with some different people as well. She was kind of the first one that we met, in face that was just like, "Here's my kid. Let's, look at his ear. Feel free," kind of thing.
So what's the upkeep like? Like, do you have to play nurse with all the bandages and just checking on things?
I did it first. So bandages came off at 2 weeks, but he had specific creams he had to do for about 6 months after. We had to send pictures to the doctor. Sometimes she would do phone consultations, and she'd ask us questions. How do you feel like this is forming? How do you feel like this is, going, this and that? Since then, really, the most we have to do is sometimes, especially as the weather changes, he had kind of, as it's adjusting and the weather's changing and his skin is still healing, he'll get dead skin sometimes. But it's certain things like, putting coconut oil on his ear, things like that we kind of have to keep up with. And that's really, it's not that intensive an upkeep. It's still sensitive. If he bangs it, he still gets, it hurts. So it's still sensitive, but it's not anywhere near. I mean, at first he wouldn't let anybody touch it. Like, it hurt me just putting lotion on it. It hurt him.
Getting a 3-year-old to do anything you ask can be difficult. The term three-nager definitely earns its title. Kim, though, says that establishing trust, structure, and distraction is what has helped them the most.
He knows we're not going to hurt him on purpose. He knows that, we're going to be there, like, we may have to clean out this ear and it might be uncomfortable, but at the end I'll hold you and cuddle you and you'll be okay. And so just kind of having some of those things, I think, helped him because he'd be like, okay, let's just, and distractions help a lot. When we had to do the creams that were daily, my husband would literally hold up an iPad or whatever and let him watch TV as I was putting on the cream and things like that.
Yeah.
So anything that can help.
You're your own child life nurse physician team at home.
Well, and it was because it was things that, they gave you a ton of instructions, but you just had to do it kind of thing.
Did you find that he did better knowing ahead of time that it was going to happen, how long it was going to take, and then it was going to be over? I mean, sometimes the easiest thing to do is just to get it done, but that doesn't always build that trust, kind of like you were saying.
Well, honestly, he got used to the fact that it was going to happen. And if I told him too much ahead of time, even in his little 3-year-old mind, he would dread it. And so it would be worse. And so I always I would tell him with a few minutes, we're going to take a bath and then put the stuff on your ear. Or we're going to go we're going to go do this and put the stuff on your ear. It was just in the next 5 or 10 minutes, you're going to get this stuff kind of thing. And so that kind of helped where he didn't have so much time that he could build it up. But he at least, when I pulled it out, wasn't in complete shock either. And I tell him now, if I can tell, and I can notice it if it needs to be cleaned in certain ways, and I'll just say, tonight when we take a bath, we need to clean out your ear. And sometimes he won't want it to happen. Sometimes he's fine with it. So it just kind of depends too. He's still 3, so that he's still a teenager. So some days are great, some days are not so much.
I think a lot of parents can relate to what Kim is saying. Although this experience comes with challenges for Thomas and their whole family, Kim points out some bittersweet moments too.
I mean, I think with the surgery, the thing I got to the point where I was a little bittersweet. Like, I was kind of sad that I was going to lose his little ear. I made my husband go out and like get pictures done the month before because I was like, I've got to have pictures of his little ear before I lose it. But when we saw his new ear, and I mean, it just looked like he looked so different, and it was so pretty. Like, she did such a good job on it that just seeing it the first time, like, I was in tears. He kept asking me why my face was leaking, and I was like, because he was like, I know you're not sad. Like, what's going on with your face? And so it was overwhelmingly just incredible experience. I think I think it's just kind of taught me things that cannot take things for granted, though. There are so many little things that I would never have thought of, like headphones, that just to me are just something that you do that my kid doesn't do. He doesn't have a hole, so he does not wear, that's not something he can participate in. There's stuff that's made for his type of loss, so he can still, use that. But little things like that I just never thought about, and the little details of like how your ears hear differently. Both ears take in different types of sound and things like that I never even knew. I'm not like a biology or anatomy kind of person, so these were things that I had no idea about that I've learned because of his kind of journey and his experiences that kind of has just kind of broadened my scope of this part of, in this kind of group of people in this part of the world as well.
Do you have any kind of tips or tricks that really worked for you in terms of having a child with microtia, or what worked really well for your family?
Honestly, I think a big part of what worked for me and my husband was doing the research. There's a lot of information out there, but it's a condition that even some doctors don't know all the details about. When we first brought the type of surgery we wanted to have done to our ENT, they had never heard of it, which isn't surprising because it's a rare condition. And so, we weren't angry, but we were kind of like, well, they can't help us, so we have to go figure it out for ourselves. And so just doing your research, kind of finding out as much as you can. The online groups do help, but then you also have that kind of, and I think this happens in any kind of online forum, but you have that kind of, I've made this decision for myself or for my child, and if you question that decision, I might get defensive. And so it's kind of like, they're good when they're really good and positive and supportive, and for the most part they are, but you might encounter that and you just kind of have to be prepared. One thing that we didn't know at all was we didn't know until our audiologist told us that he even had the option to be aided. They just did this surgery, and I want to say it was Columbia, but it might have been Harvard, that did the surgery or the study that said that you need both ears for hearing, that they take in different sounds and you need them both. Before that, for, however many years, if you had one ear that could hear, you were fine. And so this idea that if you have one that is having a loss, it needs to be aided is very new. So you can, if you have that kind of thing where you're saying, okay, we're going to go ahead and aid our kid, a lot of people will be like, well, I've never had that. I didn't need that. Or your kid doesn't need that. Or, and you're just like, well, so it's those kind of things where you make the best decision for yourself and your family. And so it's like learning all you can, but knowing that you can make those best decisions and sticking with them. We had a lot of people that, like I said, I had to get the insurance battle insurance to approve our surgery. And we had a lot of people that were just like, just go find somebody that's here. Just go find somebody that's closer. But, we did our homework, we made our decision, we stuck to it. So it's kind of just informing yourself, but also being confident in what you choose.
Well, and it seems like it was really worth it. You seem kind of really happy and at peace with the decision that you guys made. And I'm sure a lot of that came from the strength that you guys had as kind of a family to move forward with that.
And I will tell you, because I did, especially the last few months we had to plan his surgery a year in advance. And I was probably fighting insurance almost that entire time. So I got to this point where I was kind of like, maybe we don't need to do this. Maybe it's too much. And I just, now that we've done it, now that we had that experience with this specific doctor too, it was incredible. It was one of the most positive experiences I've had as a mom. Her being in charge of that surgery, as kind of transparent as she was, as well as how positive. My kid loves his big ear. He loves it. He shows it off to people. And so it's I've never have regretted it one bit.
Did you guys do any kind of like infant sign language as he was growing up?
So our audiologist recommended that we started early. So we started infant sign language at 4 months. And he was signing by probably close to 6. And he signed probably from 6 to about 18 months. He started talking at 7 months. And he boomed about 15 months old. And from like 18 months to 2, he kind of stopped signing and just started talking. And our doctor, because he also has to get speech assessments once a year until this last year. He stopped at 3 to see if he needed help with, if he had any delays or he needed anything like that. And our doctor has told us time and time again that the only reason, because about 65% of kids with his condition have some type of speech delay, or they have learning issues, or they have something like that. And our doctor has told us time and time again that the only reason he doesn't, and that he's been very vocal and kind of ahead, is because of his hearing aid. She said if he didn't have that, like I would expect him to have some type of delay.
Oh my gosh. Thank goodness you got the good advice to get that.
And that has been my part where people, if they question, I'm like, that's why I don't question it, because I was fully prepared for speech delays. I was fully prepared for speech impediments because you don't hear it correctly, so you don't say it correctly kind of thing. And I was fully prepared for that. I'd done the reading. I knew it was very common with this condition, and it just did not happen. And, knock on wood, because he's still only like almost 4. But he hasn't had any issue at all with that. And so I'm just very much like, that to me was enough. Like if we had a similar situation, I would always say, and that's why I always tell parents, they ask, I'm always like, I would always say get aided as early as they can, because it does make a difference. Like I've seen it.
Yeah. Can you talk a little bit about when he got his hearing aid and could fully hear for the first time?
Oh, it was incredible. He was about 2 months old. It was in July, the beginning of July, in 2013. And he was overwhelmed. And you could tell, like I'm not a loud person already, so I don't think he had been able to hear me, but he could hear a whisper. He could hear, they were testing different things, and he could hear just like birds singing and things like that. And being able to, one of the parts of his type of loss is that if he's in an area that has a lot of background noise, like a mall or just a street, anything like that with a lot of background noise, they can't always differentiate specific sounds. Like if I call his name in that atmosphere, that kind of thing. And so they did some tests like that where they would see how he was responding, and he immediately could tell. He could immediately look at me and know where the sound was coming from, which had always been, it still is, the other part of that is the locational hearing, meaning that if I'm somewhere in the house and I say his name, he knows where to go. And he could immediately, he used to, when he was first born, he would just look around. Like if you called him from a different room, he would look all around like, I know there's noise, I don't know where it is. And as soon as that hearing aid was on, he could immediately just turn and look at us. He knew exactly where we were. He knew whose voice it was. It was the one thing that I wish we would have recorded. Like we took some pictures, but we didn't even think to record it. And now I'm like, why didn't we record that? Because it was just such, like, I would have loved to have shown it to our family and just shared it with them and stuff. And I was like, dang. I think we were both just so overwhelmed with it that we didn't even think about it.
I love the advice Kim gives in reference to her son and their experience. 1, learn all you can and then be confident with the decisions you make. 2, if you have a child with the possibility of hearing loss, get aided as soon as possible. Clearly, it worked so well for Thomas and their ability to communicate with each other. I asked Kim the incredibly tough question of trying to sum up their journey in one word or phrase. This is quite possibly my favorite answer ever.
Well, Thomas's great-grandmother calls him, and has called him since he was probably about a year old, the Joy Boy. And that's him. Like, he is a very happy, joyful kid. And I think that throughout everything, when we got back from surgery the night that we got home, he wanted to eat macaroni and watch Ninja Turtles. We had to call because he ate four bowls of macaroni. And we were like, is this okay? Our doctor was like, if he's not feeling sick, you're fine. Because we were like, are you sure this is, like, she had told us, don't feed him too much. But he was like, Mom, I'm so hungry. So we were like, well, he's still hungry. He's resilient, but he's joyful throughout it. Nothing gets him down. Nothing. Even when he would have his days, he would have good days and bad days after surgery, but even on a bad day, when he just wanted to rest, he was still getting through it, and he was still full of just joy. Like he's a joy boy. And that's just who he is.
A boy after my own heart. Macaroni and cheese all day and Ninja Turtles? Just perfect. If you're interested in finding out more about Microtia Atresia and would like resources, Kim recommends 4 websites, so get your pencils ready. Microtia.net, which has detailed and up-to-date information, earcommunity.org, which was started by a group of moms whose children have microtia. This website contains information about how to choose the best surgery option for your child, as well as how to talk to insurance companies about getting your child aided. Kim specifically says that if you reach out to her with any questions, she's happy to answer. They were rejected 5 times before they were approved for their specific surgeon. Kim also recommends microtiasurgery.com, which is Thomas's surgeon's site. You can literally watch the surgery take place, so you know exactly what to expect. And Pedient.com, another incredible surgeon site, Dr. Bonilla in San Antonio. If you'd like to connect with Kim, you can do so through her blog, thehillcountrywoman.com, through social media sites, Facebook and Instagram, and she also blogs for Austin Mom's Blog. I will link to all of these websites on the show notes page. I want to say a big thank you to Kim for sharing her story, and another big thank you to the incredible person and photographer that is Laura Morsman Photography for her beautiful pictures of Kim and her family for this episode. If you live in Austin, book Laura Morsman Photography now. Stay tuned for a preview of next week's episode after a word from our sponsor, Woombi MedPods.
So I'm Chelsea Vale. I'm the co-founder of Barsky Vale Designs, and we've created the first and only 360-degree swaddle sack designed specifically for hospitalized infants and neonates. Blankets and sleep sacks and things like that are currently on the market are not doing what the Woombi Med Pods are doing. So the first pod that we have is our basic Med Pod, and it's a 360-degree swaddle sack, and it's a peanut shape, which provides comfort and warmth and keeps the infant contained while still allowing flexion and range of motion. So we're reducing the physical delays that can come from being hospitalized and without caregivers, without range of motion, and we're keeping the baby, fully contained in the swaddle sack. What we also have is a patented double zipper, which makes diaper changes a lot easier, but also it makes it easier for procedures to be done, such as heel sticks, blood draws, even accessing the ID bracelet on the ankle. All you need to do is unzip the bottom zipper, pull the little foot out, and do what you need to do without disturbing the baby. And that's really important because hospitalized infants, unfortunately, with the wrapping and unwrapping and all of that that's going on, or they're being left unswaddled, we end up having babies that down the road suffer from cognitive delays, psychosocial disorders, attachment disorders, empathy issues, and things like that because of the negative touch, because of the overstimulation, the hyperstimulation, and things like that. So what we wanted to do with this swaddle sack was to decrease the amount of negative touch, wrapping, unwrapping, and overstimulation. We have a couple of different designs. So the basic Med Pod has a couple of slits on the top and the sides to allow space for central lines, for tubes, for feeds, for drains, and things like that. And the other pods are specifically designed for various patient populations, such as the Woombi Billy Pod, which is one of the most favorites, because traditionally, or I guess historically, Billy babies have not been able to be swaddled. All of the phototherapy light needs to be able to reach the skin. And so those babies are left splayed, arched, under the lights, whether they're using a wand or blanket or overhead lights, they're not able to be swaddled. But what we've done is we've created a mesh 4-way stretch fabric, but it is a 360-degree swaddle, but still allows 98% of phototherapy light to reach the skin. Nurses are going nuts over the Billy Pod. Finally, there's a way to calm those sweet babies and still allow foot bracing and flexion and all of that. We also have the Woombi Gastropod, which again is a 360-degree swaddle, but it has a midsection flap that opens on 3 sides. And what that does is it allows for medical staff to access the midsection of the baby without disturbing them, without providing negative touch, and access ostomy bags, G buttons, anything post-operative, even just assessing swelling. And we've also had some nurses say that they would use these in the NICU for servo babies because their skin needs to be open. And so they would leave that flap open. Also for newborns, they'd like to be able to assess the umbilical cord and the healing without touching the baby too much. We also have the trach pod that has a deep V-neck. And we started out calling it the trach pod because we wanted to allow space for trachs and vents. But the way that it fits on the baby actually leaves the sternum open that allows for cardiac post-operative healing. And there's also a zipper on the side that could be unzipped so you can access the port easily, or there are some slits for Broviac lines to come out. And then our last one is the Wombie gel pod that has a removable gel insert that goes in the back of the swaddle. And actually all of them are going to have that eventually. They will all have a back chamber for the gel. And what that does is it mimics the womb and provides a comforting, fluid-like position, I guess, for the baby and relieves the pressure off of the spine and pressure points and things like that. If the baby is put into side body position, then the weight of the gel can be kind of just over the side body to provide more comfort, more support, and help that baby to feel safe and secure even when they're away from caregivers. All of the Wombie Med Pods have passed OSHA standards. They've all been washed at 290 degrees, 15, 20 times. I can't remember exactly how many, but they did pass the OSHA sanitation test, and we have our certificate. There was no change in color, no change in fabric, no change in zippers or shape or size or anything like that. The fabric of the Wombie is actually a four-way stretch fabric, so it does not stretch out. It's going to snap back to size. We offer all of the Wombie Med Pods in micro preemie, and newborn size. And our goal is to be sure that every baby in the hospital, whether they're in the NICU or regular patient populations, can be swaddled, and that medical staff will have easy access to those babies. We'd like to be able to reduce hospitalization trauma so that these babies have increased cognitive development, increased psychosocial development, and increased physical development, whether or not they've ever been hospitalized or for how long. We want every baby to be swaddled.
And from next week's episode,
I don't even know if my child's going to walk and he may not even hear. I mean, it was really hard. That was definitely one of those things where it really spoke to me, Katie, when you were talking about doing these podcasts, because like at that very moment, and you really truly do feel, you're in a room with your child and your husband or your family, whoever else might be in there, and doctors, but you seriously do feel alone. I mean, you feel like, you're just like spinning. I mean, it's just such a weird experience that your brain, it's so funny how your brain just starts just going all these different directions and thoughts and emotions and, it's just hard.
That was Abigail, and next week you will hear her talk about her son's spina bifida and hearing loss diagnoses. Check back next Monday to hear this episode. Thanks so much for tuning in to the Child Life on Call podcast. See you next week.